Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good afternoon. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next 2 hours here on Radio Hamra. Studio number to call in, 310-441-0555. Our hearts, minds, feelings are all on Iran as we continue to still see images, although the internet is still shut down there as of last time I checked. Right now it's January 16th around 4 p.m. Still internet shut down. I even saw something that officials are saying it might last until the springtime, which is just crazy to think that they would do that. You know, they can make up excuses that there's other reasons for it, but it really is putting society to a halt, which just shows how scared they are and how much they're trying to make sure the images don't get out. Communication is limited both within Iran and with Iran and outside of Iran, because there's really no other explanation other than that to shut down the internet. I'm sure they have their ways of communicating within themselves, because we've seen people from the regime on TV and doing interviews with even American news outlets. So they are somehow finding a way. So we can see clearly it's not like it's impossible to have internet. They're just shutting it down to the people, which is what they do in so many ways, is shut out the people and shut things down for the people and shut them out. So it's been very, very sad for everyone. I know people trying to communicate with their families. What I keep hearing is the only means of communication people are finding is calling out from Iran, from landlines, that sometimes they can do that for maybe 1 minute before getting cut off. And even that, they are pretty sure that someone might be listening, or there's not this comfort to just say whatever you want, because there isn't this security that you're not being listened to. You know, reports are obviously going to be murky while things are going on, and especially with these types of communication shutdowns that are going on. But we're hearing anywhere from 12,000 to 20,000 people have been killed. Protesters have been killed in the last just week alone, or several days, which is just unbelievable. I mean, just they are massacring their own people. And you've probably seen videos of security forces and whoever is cracking down on the protesters, just shooting them at point blank range with military style weaponry and guns. And we are just devastated to see what is going on, and still very little or not enough international attention on what is happening. So it's definitely with a heavy heart I begin the show today. And everyone I talk to, every Iranian has that feeling. Those of us around the world, we don't have to go through what's going on for the people of Iran, but our hearts and thoughts and our feelings are there. And it's been very sad to see what we've been seeing. And we're still so proud and amazed of all of the people who are still going into the streets and protesting, despite how brutal the regime has been in response to protesters. I just saw a report or some numbers saying that 1.5 million people in Tehran were protesting on one single day, from what I saw. I think it was January 8th. 1.5 million just in one city. That is really remarkable. Of course, that's the biggest city, but still, that tells you we're talking about huge numbers of people out in the streets. And as I said, information is hard to come by because of the shutdown. We still get a lot of information, but it's much more limited than it would be if there was an internet shutdown for the people of Iran. And what makes things even worse is when you go online, social media, especially X, where people are, I think there's even more politics there, or people commentating on politics, writing out their ideas and thoughts and opinions. You just see so much misinformation and disinformation being put out there. And it's really sad and really unfortunate to see that. Again, it's not that I know the truth, or I could say I for sure know, but it's very clear when you're seeing people that seem to have an agenda to either muddy the waters or to paint a certain narrative of things that makes it seem a particular way, even from doubting the number of people that have been killed. I even received messages along that line of people saying, well, how do you know it's 12,000 when I posted that number, or, it's exaggerated, things of that sort. But also people making it seem like this is not about the people of Iran, or the people of Iran are not doing this revolution. It's, US and Israel and other forces that are the only ones involved here. It's not really the people wanting that. And I again don't know the full truth here. Could any of that be happening? Very possibly. I know Israel and the US are very involved with Iran, and have been very clearly involved. Of course, there's a 12-day war recently, and so there's a lot of focus there, or attention that is there. So I'm not saying it's not possible, and I'm not even saying it's not happening at some level. This goes back to something I talked about on Monday's show, which I'll also reiterate because I think it's so important, about black and white thinking, that we really are comforted by black and white thinking because it makes things nice and easy. It doesn't make us have to think too hard. So it's even easier on our brains to just, take it easy and see it as just black and white. It allows us to come to some sense of closure and be at peace with it. Okay, I know this person's all bad or they are all good. Or I know that these people that are protesting are all paid, agitators. It's not real people. So I can just not think about it or worry about them. So we like black and white thinking, especially when it gives us some comfort. But regardless, black and white thinking is always easier than the reality, which is more nuanced and gray. And so here, more than one thing can be true. If even Israel and US are involved at some level, again, I imagine they are not totally neutral here. But even if they are, it doesn't mean that when we say 1.5 million people protested in Tehran on one day, what does that mean? It's 1.5 million agents from these countries, or paid people, or whatever it might be. I mean, it's not realistic. It's not what the reality is. So again, it's not saying there isn't involvement, but to think that this is not a people's revolution, I think, is totally misleading, and it serves some people's narratives. Especially, of course, it serves the regime's narratives, and we know that they are very good at propaganda and putting out misinformation, disinformation, of also just making people get more paranoid about things. If you try to sow doubt, even if you make someone be revealed that they were working for the regime, it's kind of a paradoxical thing, because you would think, of course, they don't want to get caught. But if there's someone and they gain some level of attention and notoriety, and then it comes out after 2 years that actually they were supporting the regime, as much as that looks bad and it makes that person look bad and does a lot of things, but it also unfortunately sows doubt in everyone's mind of, oh, then I guess I don't know who to trust. I don't know who is actually supporting the Iranian people genuinely, and who is pretending like they are, but actually is supporting the regime. So unfortunately, we see a lot of this type of trickery and propaganda, and people playing both sides, and people revealing certain things. And I mean, if you go under almost anyone's comment about Iran, regularly you'll see something, oh, you're being paid by the regime, or you're being paid by this group, regardless of what the person is saying, whether it's pro, anti, somewhere in the middle. I just see it almost all the time. And some of that also might be bots and people trying to create commotion, for sure. So obviously that's part of it. But I also think people are just so doubtful of who to trust, and they don't know who they're supposed to trust. And this is what they're trying to do, is to make us feel like, well, we don't know what's going on. We don't know who to trust. So it makes us more feel like we're less informed, and makes us more divided, all of which supports the regime. The less divided everyone else is, the more likely they are to stay in power. And they know that very clearly. That's what they're trying to do. So I'm really heartbroken most about what is going on in Iran, but also when I look at the reaction of people, and first, that there's not as much attention on it as I think is due. Around the world, internationally, I'm seeing more of it now, which I'm happy to see. Even when I look at American national news coverage, that it's often one of the first stories, if not the first story. Of course, sometimes because of Trump and his comments, makes it probably more likely to be a top story, but still, it's getting attention, which is at least necessary, and we need that. But what I'm seeing in social media, and it doesn't surprise me because social media doesn't reward truth, it doesn't reward integrity, it doesn't reward people with good intentions. It just rewards whatever gets the most attention, which unfortunately is not the good things in general. It's more likely to be lies. It's usually going to be provocative, even if it's not helpful. It's more likely to include rage, even if that's not, makes sense as a reaction. Things about conspiracies get a lot of attention because everyone wants to know, the thing that, no one else knows, or to be ahead of the curve. And so I'm very heartbroken seeing people's responses. Also, as I said, a lot of people are paid to do certain things. A lot of people are working for the regime or are part of the regime or want to sow doubt in a variety of ways. I also think there are people out there that just, they look at world events because their business is being online talking about world events. It really is just a game to them. And, they're just trying to, oh, this is interesting. Or actually, I think it's like this. And they don't mind making comments that might contribute to more lives being lost and people not getting the support and help that they need and the justice that is needed, because it might get attention or because they want to have a cool take or an interesting take. And I think that's really very heartbreaking. And I'm seeing, for me, I think it's some of that too. I think there's a lot of reasons why people post what they post, but sometimes people just want to make an interesting comment or say, oh, people are saying it's this, but it's actually that. Those things get a lot of attention because people like to feel like they can see through things, that you can't fool me. So if there's a narrative, you'll almost always get a lot of attention if you actually, what, the narrative that everyone believes is totally wrong. People just get, even, as I say that about nothing, just that theme is interesting. Like, oh, really? Everyone thinks the president is a person, but it turns out he's a lizard person or he's not a human being. It's crazy. It's not true. But for a lot of people, that'll just be, I knew it. I kind of saw something was off about the person. I didn't think he was human. And now, because some guy says it and some guy uses AI to create some video, all of a sudden, I think it's true. And so people want to be the one that knows what other people don't know. Obviously it's an understandable place, but some people more think about that and want to go that way. And so you see a lot of people just posting things to get that kind of attention. So more than one thing can be true at the same time. If US and Israel are involved at some level, it doesn't mean this is not what the people want. That's not the case. And even as far as what's happening, after the revolution that happens, there's no way to have 100% agreement on that either. So you'll hear different voices. That's to be expected. But I've heard that to somehow be used as evidence that, no, people don't want the same thing, or no one knows what they want, and so everyone is just there's no vision here. There's nothing being seen. So I've just been very sad about the images in Iran, but also what's happening outside. All I try to keep pushing on my show is unity, just all of us working together, knowing that there is one common goal, which is to end this regime. That is a common goal for, I think, so many people. And your idea of how it's supposed to look or what should happen, or making sure it goes exactly the way you think is best. I mean, I think we have to also be realistic when you are dealing with social issues, and social change is always a bit messy. You form coalitions with people that you don't totally agree with, because if you only form a coalition with people you totally 100% agree with, all of us will be working alone or just with a few people. You have to have people that you're working with that don't see things exactly as you do. You might have a very different vision of what you're seeing, but if there is an important goal that has to happen, in this case, there is one. This regime is literally killing its own citizens in the street by the thousands. And again, everything we hear is hard to get reports, but likely an underreport, because so much of it gets hidden and bodies get hidden and families can't even find their loved ones, or have to pay for their loved ones. It's just like these horrible things that are going on. I think we have to remember that that's worth putting away some notions of thinking you even know what is right. So you might have this idea of what's supposed to happen, but we have to have that intellectual humility that we don't know. None of us knows the exact way that things have to play out or need to play out. But also that even if you feel pretty sure of it or confident that this is how it should go, recognizing that there's something bigger than that going on, that this regime being in power is just hurting people every single day and now literally killing people every single day. So for those of us outside, we have to amplify their voices of the people inside of Iran. But the more disunited we are, and the more we fight amongst each other, and the more we put out very different things, it's going to make it less likely for that voice to be heard around the world. We need to be more unified to really amplify their voices together. There's a lot more strength in a unified amplification than people being torn apart in so many different ways. And before I go to the commercial break, around the world this weekend, again, there will be protests happening here in Los Angeles. It's on Sunday from 12 to 2 p.m. at City Hall, downtown Los Angeles. So I hope you'll go make your voices heard in that way. It's another way of bringing attention, letting the people of Iran know we are with them, even though what we can do is so small compared to what they can do, but we must do what we can do and make sure we make our voices heard. So I hope you'll find your local protest or the nearest one to you and go and make your voice heard. And I'll talk more about that too. Let's go to a commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I was talking in the previous segment about just what's happening in Iran, but what's happening outside of Iran and people's reactions, responses, and what I'm seeing and hearing. And as I was saying, this black and white thinking and the ways that we approach the world is something that I think we all have to really come to terms with. There's a notion that in school they shouldn't teach you what to think, but how to think. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of us are not very good at it. And today's culture, the social media world is actually making us far worse at thinking through things, thinking critically about things, coming to conclusions that are nuanced and balanced and have some weight to them. And we're just being totally swayed by the wrong ideas and wrong messages. Even when I look at people who are considered thought leaders, podcasters, I know I'm saying this as I'm doing my own radio show podcast, podcasters that are, have millions of followers and become very popular, social media influencers, and the ways they talk about things, it really baffles my mind of what it takes to be an intellectual in today's day and age. What gets people to be seen as intellectuals or smart people in today's day and age. To begin with, one thing, this is kind of going away from Iran specifically. So, and I mentioned this, I'll say this again because I do want to make this note that Iran is the thing that's on all of our hearts and minds, and definitely on my own. I'm definitely not a journalist to be one that I can say I could report or have the newest information. I try to share some things that I'm seeing, but I don't claim to have that type of knowledge, skills, and also just approach in general on my show. I'm not someone who can serve as that kind of a person. And even when I talk about things other than Iran, it's not because I think they're more important. It's often that I say a lot of things in this long form type of a show. I only have so much that I can say. I already probably ramble a bit, but without rambling. So just want to make that note that although I may talk about things related, besides even more unrelated, it's not that Iran isn't on my mind. It's that at times there's only so much that I can share twice a week about what's going on, and specifically, especially since I'm not a journalist. But as I was saying, I wanted to talk about the way we think about things, because I think it unfortunately creates more division and disunity, as I was touching on in the previous segment. So, the people that you're seeing becoming the thought leaders, it really blows my mind when you listen to what they say. Very often they don't have much to say at all. They're very good at creating, meme-like talking points, things that are very short and, have a punch that can go viral, that someone could post a short clip of. They're good at that. They're good at marketing, obviously, which, helps get them to that place. A big thing that they do is they sell a lot of certainty. To me, that's the currency of today is certainty. Everyone just tries to say things in the most certain way because it makes you sound smart. This is actually, um, I forget the Bertrand Russell quote, but basically something like the problem with the world is that the people who know things doubt themselves and the people that don't know don't doubt themselves. It's something like that, but it's very true. Because what happens with people, for example, in the sciences, when they talk about things that they've studied for decades and they present what they've learned, they still present it because of the scientific method and the scientific mindset as, you know, probabilistic, or it seems this way, or the evidence supports this. They don't say this is the truth, this is the only way it could be, and it can't change from this, this is it. Even if they have, decades of research supporting an idea, they talk about it in a way that represents how science is, which is that it's our best awareness, best guess, best understanding at this time. But we know that the whole point is to keep trying to falsify it, to find, make it better, refine it over time. So this isn't the end. It's the best we have at this time. Even I've heard people, they say, well, the theory of revolution, it's just a theory. And when they hear theory of evolution, they're thinking about how if someone's talking, they say, oh, I have a theory about why those two broke up. And really, when people say I have a theory in that kind of a way, they mean like, this is my guess, or I don't know, I saw them fight one time, or I feel like this was going on. It's like based on limited information, and just like, this is my idea, or if I had to guess what it is. But when theory is used in the sciences, it's meaning that there's lots of evidence pointing towards some explanation, and this is the explanation. It could still be untrue and definitely can be refined and will be refined, but it's not theory like, it's just a guess. But people, I think at times, look at the sciences and how things are said, also that things get updated over time, that there isn't this absolute certainty in how things are presented currently. And then because of that, and in the right way, things will change over time. And as a result, they think, well, that means that the people in the sciences don't know anything. And so what you see happens as a result is people trust people outside of a field more than they at times trust the people in the field who are studying it. Because the person outside of the field will say, no, I know for sure this is how it is. This is what's going on. And this is what this is. And they never, it's all black and white, which is very simple. It's all very certain and conclusive without any shadow or sliver of doubt in there. And it makes the person sound smarter. If you don't know, if you don't think about things a little bit more deeply, and one person comes to you and says, I think there's a good likelihood that blah, blah, blah. And someone else says, I know this is what's going to happen. Our reaction naturally is going to be to think that the person who says they know knows more than the person who's saying this is what the evidence is supporting. In likelihood, I see it this way. So our human reaction and instincts tell us that that person is more confident when they say things in that way. And so that makes sense. I can get that, and in some things it does make sense. So if I ask my friend, what time does the party start tomorrow? And one of them says, I think it's at 6. And I was like, no, it starts at 7. I probably, if I know their personalities and feel like they're both pretty like honest and don't jump the gun on things, and I could take their word. I'm like, okay, the one who said they're more confident, they probably know, whereas the other one seems like they were unsure. So our natural tendency is to assume that when people are more certain, it's because they have more truth or they have a better understanding of the truth. Unfortunately, people use this as is happening in all types of, humans are good at pretending characteristics more than they are worried about doing them accurately. So it's important to look honest than be honest. It can be more important to look kind than be kind. Machiavelli was definitely onto something. I'm not saying I'm saying it was good, but I feel like he was one of the first self-help authors. His book, when I read it, I thought it was going to be so dark, and it, of course, had manipulative types of ideas in it, but it wasn't something outside of what a lot of self-help books do, where it's like, okay, here's how you can make it seem like you're a good listener, or here's how you can make the people think you're trustworthy or whatever. Rather than being trustworthy, being a good listener, it's about looking that way. And that's a lot of what people are trying to do, is just look a certain way. And so because people assume naturally that someone who's more certain knows more or knows better, people manipulate that to getting people to trust them, to making it seem like they know better than other people because they talk in overly certain ways. That this is how this is, and with some anger and conviction, it makes it seem like there's something there. And then the other person who's a little more hesitant, like, oh, this person seems like they don't know what they're talking about. But when it comes to fields of science, really almost, I really think it's any field, but or any type of information, especially predicting to things, people who are more aware of possibilities in a genuine way will talk in more tentative ways. I used this example before. If someone tells you in Los Angeles, in 150 days, the weather is going to be 72.4, the humidity is this, and gives you all these types of very specific to the last, digit, multiple digits of, past the decimal point, certainty of every kind of characteristic of the weather on some day. That sounds really confident, but I don't know enough. And my understanding, even subtly, is that we can't make that precise of a decision or a prediction that far in advance. So people who know the weather and meteorology and all that, they won't make that kind of a prediction because they know they can't. They might give you a range based on past history, based on what we're seeing this year and, whatever models that we have. Here's the range of temperatures it could be on that day or how confident we would be. But it would sound less confident than the guy that's saying, I know for sure all of these things. And that guy sounds really cool. Like, wow, he's saying, I know it this well. And, he sounds really smart. And he's not going to be proven wrong for like 4 months. So it can make him look good. And by that time, people might forget. He just seems like a person who knows better than the quote unquote experts. And that's how people present themselves. The experts don't really know. I know better than them. And it goes really far. I was mentioning in the last segment, people like to feel like they kind of see through the BS, or they see through the things that people should think, and they see it better than them. So they'll be drawn to these kinds of people. And so we have to be very aware of our instinctual drive or pull towards certainty. It makes sense when someone says they know for sure something. That's very comforting. And uncertainty creates anxiety, which doesn't feel good, and people want to get away from that anxiety. So they're looking for certainty, for someone to tell them they know something for sure. So we have to, almost adjust for that. That when someone is certain, it's going to sound good to us and feel good to us, but we want to be able to discount that. Especially, we actually should think not just that, oh, we should discount it. At times, we should disqualify them. If someone is so overly certain in a way that they realistically cannot be, we have to discount that person, not just about that, but in general, that they're not a very trustworthy person. Because either they don't know what they don't know. They don't really get that, although they think they're so confident, they can't be that confident, and that's not good. Or they're trying to manipulate us, or they're trying to use that as a vehicle to gain our trust and get our attention, our money, or whatever it might be. And that should be disqualifying. So we actually should be more uncertain of very certain people, even though our instinct is to feel more certain about them, more confident about them. And actually, in a very different realm, in eyewitness testimony, this is actually, they've done research on this, that the confidence of the witness seems to not be correlated with the veracity or the truthfulness of their testimony, of eyewitness, witnesses. So it doesn't mean they are people that are intentionally doing it wrong, but people that seem more confident or say more confidently they know that, oh, it's this person, or, the weapon was this, or whatever it was from the eyewitness testimony. Their confidence doesn't seem to be correlated with the truth, which again, you would think has to be. If someone's more confident, then doesn't it mean they know more? But in many instances, this is not the case. Some people just tend to be more overconfident, or some people, because they're afraid of being wrong, might present it as more, confident to compensate or to project their own uncertainty in some or opposite way, or almost like a reaction formation. They're kind of getting rid of their own doubt to make it seem like they're very confident. So we have to be careful that we all can get fooled by certainty. It's a very powerful drug. We all want to have that comfort of knowing or feeling like we know with a capital K the truth, or that someone has the truth and we can just trust and follow them. But the reality is that's not the case. And that's really tough when we're dealing with situations like what's happening in Iran, where knowing can be very important. Is this happening or that happening? How many people are being killed? Which the exact number to me definitely matters, especially each individual. But if it's 15,000 or 18,000, yes, that matters, but it's still something horrible is happening. And sometimes people also like to make those specifics become the focus, even though that takes away the focus from what really matters. Sometimes that's even intentional. But this whole topic that I was bringing up was when we look at people who are considered thought leaders, one of the things that they often sell is certainty. But I'm saying we want to be mindful of not being sold by that certainty and realizing that if someone is being too certain, if they're presenting things in a way that doesn't make sense or that shouldn't make sense or shouldn't be possible, that we actually disqualify that person. What I find really disheartening is right now the opposite is true. To show that you're qualified to have an opinion, you have to be absolutely certain. Whereas to me, that should be disqualifying, making your opinion not matter or not important. But we've gone too far on that end where people just think that's how people talk, that if someone knows something about a topic, they say it in this absolute certain way, simplified way. It could be put into 30 seconds when that isn't the case. So after the break, I'll continue on this theme of what we tend to be drawn towards in thinking or ideas or the ways that people present their ideas and how that might mislead us, because I think it's definitely playing out here as it does in all instances with how we take in information. So let's go to our next commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back. In the last segment, I was talking about how certainty, although it sounds good or it makes us feel comforted when a person is very certain about what they're talking about, we actually have to be mindful to discount it at times or even disqualify that person if they are being overly certain, if they are talking in certain ways about things that we can't be certain about. And especially when they are trying to talk in certain ways about things that people that are experts in their field don't talk with certainty about. And to be very aware that that doesn't mean that the experts know less than this person, it's that the experts actually recognize how much we don't know or the unpredictability of things, or to talk about things in a way that represents that this is just the current state of understanding, not some final state. And so they might sound more tentative, which makes them sound less smart or less aware or that they know less, but it's actually because they know more, that they understand that there are limits to what we can know or what we can predict or what we can say. So that's a very big one that if you look at, I think, social media doesn't, it does create some new things, but it's not that it's something that wasn't there before. I could talk about it in other contexts, but like many things that social media does, it amplifies or exaggerates some human tendencies and makes them even stronger, multiplied or scaled at a larger level. So it is something we see a lot on social media, that because there's so much competition and people are trying to stand out, whatever field or area we're talking about, the voices that usually get amplified the most are the most certain ones. That's one of the qualities that we see a lot of. And so being mindful of how certainty will sound good, but if we think about it more deeply and look at the bigger picture, we will see that it often is a disqualifying feature rather than a good thing or something that qualifies someone. And related to that, the next one I'm going to talk about almost sounds, I don't know about funny, but might sound strange, but charisma is something that we have to discount as well. I know that seems weird because we like to hear, we like to see people who are charismatic. We like to listen to charismatic speakers. And even within charisma, I'll mention eloquence, which is part of that, which that too, again, we want to hear eloquent speakers, and that makes sense. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, of course, and maybe not right now, maybe not ever, but sometimes I feel I can be eloquent and that I could use my words well, or I can find the right words. So you could think about this for me too, if you consider me eloquent in any way. But the reason why we have to discount charisma or just something to be mindful of. Is it's another thing that will make us feel, will be drawn towards liking what we hear. If someone very, even physically attractive is talking, it makes you like what they're saying more than if someone less physically attractive is talking. This is, we see this in all sorts of media and advertising. It's just something that gets more of our attention. It makes us feel good. Just biologically, we feel better looking at someone who's better looking. That's just how it is, or we find better looking. And so, because of that, if we're trying to judge the ideas of someone, we have to recognize that this positive, so you hear a term, like halo effect, but I don't know if it exactly applies here, but this way of feeling about the person is something we have to be careful that we don't let affect our ability to judge what they are saying. Because if we're talking about music, for example, you can say, I like to watch a singer who, looks good and dances good and all that. And that makes sense. That's part of what you're doing, is you're getting entertained. That makes sense to have that. The problem is that when we're looking at someone sharing ideas, their ideas are what matters, not the package. And the packaging can mislead us when we see someone who is, good looking and charismatic and has certain traits that are appealing. It'll fool us into thinking their ideas are even better than they are because of just the packaging that is there. That's just natural. So that's what I mean by discounting it. I actually remember one time someone sent me some videos of someone that they wanted me to check out or give my opinion on. And jokingly, but half seriously, based on what I'm saying now, you can tell, I said, oh, they're charismatic. I don't like that, something like that. But I was basically saying that the way they're presenting their ideas, I'm aware of how it's coming off, but I want to really look at the substance of the ideas. So paradoxically, we have to recognize again that we're drawn to this. We're drawn to the certainty. We're drawn to the charisma, but it's a thing that we have to discount because the charisma is not something that is telling us about the quality of the ideas. It's something that just feels good to us. We get drawn to that. So I don't know if they've done research like this, but if they had two people expressing the same ideas and one of them was much more physically attractive than the other ones, I would imagine people would buy into that message much more or listen to that message much more, even if the idea was the same. And here, of course, it's not just about physical appearance, and physical appearance doesn't even have to just mean like sexual attraction or attraction of a that you'd find in a romantic partner or sexual partner. It could be other ways, but overall charisma, even how someone talks, and now I'll talk about eloquence and how they express their words. We have to be mindful of that. And this is a tough one because words can do a lot. And, let's say something like poetry or, music, and the words of the music can affect us in ways that feels really good. It resonates with us. It makes us feel emotions. And similarly, when someone is a good speaker, they can at times penetrate our hearts and go deep and make us feel something. And I'm not here to say, oh, that's always a bad thing, or you shouldn't feel anything, or if you feel something, that's bad. But I am saying we have to be a bit careful. A little bit of healthy skepticism can be helpful. Let yourself be in the moment and feel it. But if we're really going to evaluate what just happened, we want to make sure that we really take a look at what the ideas were that were expressed and not just go by how we felt about it. Intuition can be great. It can guide us. So I'm not saying we ignore it completely, what you felt about it, but we do want to be aware that people can present things in ways that sounds really smart or sounds really good or sounds very deep when they aren't any of those things. That last one, deep, there's a whole body of science looking at pseudo profound BS, which is what they call it, where there's a lot of these, spiritual and wellness kind of people, but in general, the way that people can be drawn to things that sound very deep, but don't really mean very much. And sometimes even the more deep it sounds, or the more unclear it is, it almost sounds more mysterious. It can make it feel like it's something even deeper when it's just making less sense. So we do have to be aware of our tendency to get drawn by certain things that don't have to do with the quality of the ideas that are being said. And so someone who's an eloquent speaker can present very bad ideas in very beautiful ways, and they might still sound very beautiful. I'm actually, or even intellectual ways, so they can use the right language and genuinely use good, pick the right words and make it sound very smart. This is something I think about when we look at any time period, or if we look at our own time period, we have to think back and learn lessons from the past. That if you look throughout history, you'll always see that whatever injustice was going on, the people that were performing that injustice or who were benefiting from that injustice will have put forth ideas using very beautiful language to express very ugly ideas. For example, here in the United States, the idea of slavery being abolished was something that was discussed for a long time before the Civil War and before it was eventually abolished. And there were many intellectual people who were pro-slavery, and they would express their ideas using, terms that sound very scientific, terms that sound very legalistic and intellectual and even smart, but they were presenting very, very ugly ideas supporting that someone should be able to own another person and justifying that. So even if something sounds very intellectual and it seems to have an intellectual strength about it, that doesn't mean that the idea that's being expressed is intellectually strong or morally strong or is just or the right thing. And we have to be very mindful of that. So that's what I mean when I say we have to almost discount eloquence or be mindful of not being fooled by the beauty of someone's words or someone's way of speaking or of the speaker. Going back to what I was saying about the charisma and how someone looks, that is something that is counterintuitive, because if we hear a speaker and it feels persuasive, it feels interesting, it feels right, it'll make us think this person is right. But we do have to be very careful about following that person. And so, as I was saying in the previous segment, what I see of people who are considered thought leaders, people who people look to learn from, to get their opinion, and then sometimes just swallow their opinion and make it their own opinion, are often people that are good at these kinds of things. They're very certain. They might have charisma, look good, have a good marketing and appeal and branding and all those things. But a lot of times what they're saying has very little intellectual strength to it or intellectual value, but people don't care. They're drawn by those other qualities. So we have to be careful not to get fooled by those things. And we all are. I mean, I definitely am too. I hear someone talking, I'm going to be affected by all of these things. What I'm saying is that we want to be a little bit mindful of what might draw us in that actually isn't of value, that isn't the things that we should be, paying attention to. Another thing I'll say here that, especially in America, but I think around the world, you see this phenomenon that if someone has made a lot of money, people assume that we should listen to them. This person is smart. I see that a lot. Oh, this person's smart. They've made, especially if they made it like rags to riches, if they didn't have anything and they made it themselves. And then we think we should listen to them about everything or other things like that are going on. And I think this is just a really unfortunate consequence. I shouldn't say it like as if it's the worst one, but an unfortunate consequence of capitalism, capitalistic thinking, and the myth of meritocracy, that the people that make it and the people that make wealth are superior, and it's just from their hard work and being better than other people that they make their wealth. Unfortunately, it makes people think that if someone is wealthy, it just qualifies them to now be a spokesperson about everything. This person made a lot of money. We should listen to them about some women's rights. It's like, I don't really get the connection. So yes, they maybe have done well in their business, which is fine. And often people that, even some of these people that become popular because they have certain mindsets, you've learned about their past and you see that they made money in not the best ways anyway. So again, there is this sense that if you've made money, it doesn't matter what you did to make it, you have the money, and people will just praise you and follow you and, think you must be doing something right because of that, even if you're doing wrong things, morally wrong types of things. And so let's just say even in business or the type of business you did well, which there's definitely luck involved. I'm not saying it's just luck. People definitely work hard, make good decisions. So that's for sure there. but there's also luck and timing and lots of things that go into it. That doesn't necessarily mean this person will even be able to give you good business advice, but let's just leave that part aside. Let's say they can. But this idea that then they should speak on every topic because they've made money, to me is kind of crazy. It's like, okay, this person made money selling whatever they sold. That's good, and maybe they can help people learn sales. But why is their opinion on AI or their opinion on political issues of any value necessarily? It could be, but why is this qualifying them to have these political opinions? But I think that people really mistake this idea that if someone made a lot of money, they must be really smart, and if they're really smart, then we should listen to their opinion about everything. And so I think just that idea is really broken, and something that is unfortunate that people see things in this way, that we should listen to someone because they made a lot of money. I also think the ways that we look for people to think for us. So there's this idea, if someone is very certain and we have trust in them for, whatever characters we're seeing in them, then if they say things, we think that they can do the thinking for us. And this is a big, big thing for me, that no one could do the thinking for you. No one can do the thinking for you. It's great to listen to who you think are respectable thinkers and intellectuals and read people's books and all of that. Absolutely. So I'm not saying, you're completely on your own and don't look anywhere, just only look inside. So definitely do that. But at the end, you have to look inside to come to your own conclusion, and you have to make sure you're thinking for yourself, not just hearing the ideas, thinking, now that's my idea. And that's what you see a lot of people think, oh, they go ahead, this is like this. And then if you ask them to explain it, they have no idea why they believe that, but they heard someone that they think is smart say that, and now they want to say that because they want to sound smart and it makes them feel smart. But if you can't explain why you think a certain way about something, you don't actually think that way about it. You have to understand the issue to say that you think some way or have this clear opinion about it. We all have feelings about things like, pro-life, pro-choice, on guns, on everything. Yes, we think about them. We also feel about them. But if you have swallowed someone else's ideas and now regurgitate those ideas, you don't have an opinion. You're just repeating someone else's opinion. So we have to keep in mind that even though there are people who are studying different fields, people that are intellectuals, people that you might respect their intelligence, that's all good and fine, but just remember that no one could do the thinking for you. The example I like to sometimes, to say about this topic is even Einstein was wrong, not just wrong in general about other things, but in the world of physics, he made mistakes, or, he came up with things that later were proven wrong. He made incredible discoveries, and it was wonderful. But my point is to say that no one could do the thinking for us, and we can't take someone, even Einstein, who's literally, the word we use to talk about someone smart, as we say they're an Einstein, even he was wrong in his field, let alone other ones. So we can't even trust someone to always be right in any area. And especially we shouldn't then think, well, because they're smart in one area, they're smart in every area. Or the example I was saying before, because they made a lot of money, they must have good opinions about everything. These things are totally unrelated. They're not meaning very much at all, but people give them a lot of meaning, that someone who made a lot of money is just a genius. So let's hear what they have to say about everything. Let's go to another commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So I've been sharing some things to be aware of when we're hearing people's ideas, hearing thoughts out there, and then coming to our own conclusions. But really, I was sharing things that we want to discount, or things that might fool us into thinking we should listen to someone or make us want to believe them and listen to them, that we want to be careful about, because there is a human tendency to trust certain things, and people then can exploit that to make us trust them more when we should, or even if they're not intending to fool us. If they're charismatic in certain ways, attractive, we might listen to them even though we aren't actually paying attention enough to their ideas. We're paying attention to them as a package and who they are. And related to that, what I want to talk about in this segment is listening to people that we like, and by like, I mean someone we've already trusted or we believe is smart or knows what they're talking about. And so because we think of them as smart and right, and we like them, we are often having a hard time to see what they're saying objectively, or we're not going to see what they have to say objectively. And this relates to what I was talking about in the last segment, and that, and also about black and white thinking in general, that even if you think someone is smart, even if you like them, it doesn't mean they're never wrong. And it doesn't mean that if you doubt them about one thing, all of a sudden they're not smart at all or they don't know what they're talking about. But in our black and white thinking type of a world, we think that if someone is smart, they're always right. And if someone is wrong, then they're not smart because of that, way of thinking. And also the opposite, someone you don't like is always wrong. So you see this even in politics where people think if I don't like this politician, then everything they do has to have been stupid. They can't have made any good decisions. So you can either like Trump or dislike Trump, but if you think either everything he did was right or everything he did was wrong, either one of those are stupid positions to have, to assume that everything that the person does is right or wrong. But we do see that the political climate and the polarization and hyperpolarization we see makes people think that you have to think and talk in those ways. That nothing, let me think of how what they did was wrong, or let me think of how what they did was right. Now, some of it is at times because of the image and trying to look a certain way. So we see people in political parties defending their side for doing the same thing they might attack someone on the other side for doing. But also we do have this bias that we tend to think that what our team is doing is more okay than if the other side did that same thing. They must have had bad intentions when we did not have bad intentions. So we want to be aware that we have a tendency to think that someone that we like is right and good. And so that we also have to be mindful of when we are thinking through things, that if you follow some intellectual and think that this person is very smart and this person is right about things, you're obviously going to be biased to think that the next thing they say is true. That's true of all of us. I'm definitely like this too. There's some thinkers that I really like and think are very smart. And even when I've read some of their books, I've had to try to remind myself, so I was like, wow, this is so brilliant. This is so wise. This is so smart. But I have to remind myself, and I tried, I'm sure I always didn't do it enough, of okay, but let me also make sure I'm being skeptical about this person's ideas too. Not just assuming because I like them, because I think they're so smart and brilliant, that everything they're saying is right, and not questioning it in any way or letting myself think, as I was saying before the segment, make sure I'm not trying to let someone else do the thinking for me. And so to remind myself to keep that skepticism, because I know if I was reading a book or hearing the opinion of someone I didn't like, and I thought was either stupid or immoral, or I totally disagreed with their ideology, I'm sure I'd be much more skeptical than I would be of someone that I felt like, I already liked and I admired in some way. So we have to be careful about this because everyone is wrong sometimes. Even someone who's brilliant is wrong sometimes. And so we have to be aware that if we like someone, we're more likely to put our guard down intellectually, to not critically think about what they're saying. Okay, does this make sense? Or in what ways do I agree or disagree with what they're saying? Or what other nuance might I see in what is going on here, the topic that is being discussed? We are not good at that. We tend to just think once we found that person that we can trust them. And people are trying to sell that too, because that's worth a lot. If people think your opinions are all right and always correct, they're going to keep coming back to you. And if you sell courses or sell certain things, they're going to come to that, but they're going to watch your videos. Those views will get you money, get you attention, notoriety, fame, those things that most people are drawn towards or trying to get, especially someone like that is going to want those things. So we have to be mindful of this, that there's this trap of thinking that someone you already admire or like is right. And it feeds into all those things I was saying before. Often there'll be people that are more certain and have more charisma, and those things definitely go together too. People who are persuasive speakers often can be very certain in how they present their ideas, which can make them sound even better, sound even stronger, and appeal to our hearts even more and get us to go towards them. So all these things, they can be separate, that you might have one quality that I'm talking about here, but very likely there's people that have all of these qualities that I'm discussing, or you like them because they're charismatic and certain and all those things. But I'm saying now, just being aware of that when you are taking in information, that your filter is going to be very different based on if you like the person or not. If you've already put this person in the category of smart and intellectual, especially if you put them in the category of always right, which we sometimes will do. We might not say that. If I ask you to say, oh, I know no one's perfect. So we kind of get that intellectually. But when we actually function, we'll find that we're just taking in what they're saying. And even if we don't agree or we don't get it, we'll assume, well, it must be over my head, or maybe it's something I'm not getting about it because this person must be right. And you see this, that people will hear someone say something and it might not make sense or it might be wrong. And even you look in the comment section, and people's response are like, whoa, this is like so brilliant, I can't even understand it, rather than, oh, maybe it was kind of gibberish and that's why I don't get it. Or if something they disagree with, like, oh, there must be something deeper to what they're saying, because like, I think this is wrong, or I always thought this was wrong, but if they're saying it, maybe I'm missing something about it. And it's not to say that's never going to be the case. People will give us insights and make us see things that we couldn't see before. So we want to be open to that too. But we don't want to just assume that if the person we think is smart and the person we like is saying something, well, then it has to be right, even if it goes against everything we thought we knew before. And the opposite, if you don't like someone, that what they're saying must be wrong, and I have to find a way to attack it. So this is another thing that we have to be careful about, that because it simplifies things, it's nice to just think of the person who we like who's always right, and have other people that we don't like and are always wrong. But that's just not going to be the reality. That can't be the case, that someone is always right or someone is always wrong. I've said this before, that if someone comes up to me and says, I listen to your show and I agree with everything you ever say, obviously it's flattering. I would initially have a positive reaction towards that. But realistically, that would tell me that either they're just flattering me or they're really not listening to my show critically enough. Because if they're listening in a non-passive way, that they're engaged and considering what I'm saying, reflecting on it, having their own ideas about it, challenging it, then it's impossible that someone would agree with everything I say on my show. I mean, I've been doing the show, close to 12 years now? Wow. 12 years now. I'm sure I haven't listened to my shows from 11 years ago, but I would likely disagree with some of what I said 11 years ago, or at least maybe see it at least slightly differently than I did 11 years ago. I'm sure that's going to be the case. So even I don't agree with everything I've ever said on this show. So it would make sense. But we always think, one, it's a flattering thing to say, which I get it, that it sounds flattering and it will sound nice. But also that that's realistically possible. Because to me, it's not. How could you think exactly like someone else does? It just doesn't make sense. So it sounds like something good to say and might feel good to the person listening. And it also feels good to us. Oh, everything they say is right. It's way more comforting than, this part I disagree with, this part I don't. I see it a little bit differently, this part. That's a lot harder to do and takes more effort and makes us challenge our beliefs of someone being this intellectual that we maybe have internalized them to be. And so I will now, talk a bit more about this black and white thinking, especially related to what is happening in Iran, because as I mentioned in the first segment, there's sometimes talks of who's involved. Is it Israel and the U.S. orchestrating these protests? Are they paid agitators and these kinds of things? When, as I said, I don't know if that's definitely not true, but what seems pretty clear to me is that even if that's happening, two things can be true at the same time. There is some foreign involvement at some level, but there's an overwhelming majority of people who are protesting the streets in Iran because they're unhappy with the government and the lives that they're allowed to live because of this government in Iran. And they're trying to take their country back. So 1.5 million people protest in Tehran in one single day. That's telling us that it's not just some foreign agents and agitators that are creating this. That's not the case. And I also know my whole life, being almost 44 years old, I only heard people being unhappy about the regime. Yes, it's people that maybe you could say a circle of types of people, so you might hear the same types of voices, but this isn't some new anger about the regime that people are having. We saw it just a couple of years ago with the Masa Amini protests, that people were very upset, and protests broke out in strong numbers that time as well. And they have many times in the 47 years that this regime has been in power. So this is not something that just manufactured out of thin air. It's something that has been there for a long time. This anger has been there for a long time, but mobilizing it or it coming out in these ways might happen in different waves or at different times. And right now we're seeing that happen yet again. So the black and white thinking is easier to think, oh, it's all fake or it's all real or it's all this. But we have to be able to entertain that more than one thing can be true at the same time. There's a lot of room for yes and rather than but. It has to be one way or the other. And also related to what I was just saying, what I think is unfortunate is that people, when it comes to political issues, especially when we're learning about them, and I understand where you're trying to get informed. And as you're getting informed, you learn information, but you also learn who is in favor and who is against whatever it is that we're talking about. So you hear about, oh, there's some situation in so-and-so country, that you don't know that much about. And then you find out the Republicans are on this side of it, or the Democrats are on this side of it, or this politician is on this side of it, or that side of it. And without knowing it, or you might not want to acknowledge it, but it'll be true, just based on who you know is in favor or who is against it, it'll already start to form or shape your opinion about the topic. So if you like some politician, you find out that they are in favor of one side, you're more likely to be in favor of that side and assume, oh, well, I think like this person thinks, so I probably will think the same as they do about this issue. And vice versa. If you don't like that person, they're supporting a certain side, oh, that must be the bad side before you even know that much. And then, you go learn more about it. So we have to be aware of this tendency, which unfortunately makes people think certain things, even about Iran. They think, okay, if Trump wants to intervene or not intervene, that's going to affect my opinion of what's going on. Or if Trump is supporting the protesters, then that means this. Or if he's against the protesters, it means this. And we have to be aware that you can agree with someone you don't like and you can disagree with someone you like. It's not just black and white. But I see what happens is, for example, when Israel gets brought into the picture, people talk about Israel being involved in some way, it makes people react in one way or the other based on what they think and feel about Israel, whatever that might be. So if they're pro-Israel, they might think, oh, then I should be pro this movement if Israel is wanting this to happen. If they're against Israel, then they might think, oh, I should be against this movement because if they're for it, it must be bad. When again, more than one thing can be true at the same time. Someone you disagree with might feel a certain way about something, and you might also feel that way, which feels weird for you, but that's just the reality. You're not going to disagree on everything. Or they might have their own reasons for believing or caring about what they care about, but you might want it for different reasons. And so that's, what you think. There might be oil executives that might want regime change in Iran because they might think that could open some things up for them. I don't want that to happen where, Iran's resources are plundered. And from what we're seeing in Venezuela, that's a possible risk, definitely a very real one. So if this oil executive wants that to happen, then it shouldn't make it that you not think, no, I don't want for there to be regime change in Iran because if they're happy about it, it must be a bad thing. You could want it for different reasons. You might want it for the humanitarian reasons and you want these 90 million people to be freed from an oppressive government, but they might have their own reasons. But you could still want the same type of thing to happen, even if it's for very different reasons. So I would hope that people can have these types of nuanced discussions and ways of thinking. But unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of, oh, this group is in favor of it, so it must be bad. Or, okay, if they want this and I don't like them, then I have to be against this, which is very sad because we're talking about innocent people's lives that are being just looked at as some kind of a team exercise or, a battle between us versus them, where the us includes whatever that group is and everyone that they like or approve of. The enemy of your enemy is not always your friend, and the friend of your friend is not always your friend either. These things are more complicated than that. And so I hope that when people look at these issues, they won't hear one thing and think, oh, okay, if this country wants this, then I must be for it or against it because of my feelings about that country in general. And also to keep in mind that there isn't this black and white thinking that it's either this or that and completely this or that. Lots of things could be going on at the same time. When 1.5 million people go into the street in one city, they don't all have the exact same thinking and reasons for being in the streets. They likely have some unified thought, which is end this regime, but lots of different reasons can be there that might push them to actually walk onto the streets and protest in the streets. We have to just assume that that is the case, that it's not black and white. So just some thoughts on ways that we can be more mindful consumers of information, more mindful of how we make our decisions and what we support, and realizing that things are not so black and white. There's always much more gray in the reality of any situation. Let's go to another commercial break. We'll be right back. We're back. Another topic when I think of situations like what is going on in Iran is, I think for Iranians, this is less likely to happen because we're just so impacted by it that there's no way for us to just comfort ourselves about it or try to feel okay about it. But we do see this if there's some distance or we're trying to calm ourselves about what's going on in the world, that we somehow try to justify it as being okay, that we somehow try to come to terms or come to peace with it. And sometimes that might mean minimizing what's going on, blaming the victims, or doing different types of mental gymnastics to get to a place where we feel okay, because we don't like to obviously not feel okay, feel unsettled about things. So by default, understandably, we have this desire to feel good and to definitely not feel bad. I mean, it sounds so basic that it might need to not be said, but I think it does help set the groundwork of what I'm going to talk about. So we just have a tendency to go towards things that feel good and avoid things that feel bad. That's even actually the foundation of emotions. When we think of the most primitive type of feelings, and even bacteria, we can say have feelings, because they go towards things and go away things based on what they sense in their environment. And so that's the most primitive level of feelings, is to either go towards, approach something, or avoid something. Something is dangerous and harmful, go away from it, I don't like it. Something is beneficial, I want to go towards that. And so we just have that tendency in general, and it's constantly affecting things that we do, whether we're aware of it or not. Something feels good, we're more likely to go towards it. Something doesn't feel good, we're more likely to go away from it. And this is even why we have to put so much effort and focus on delayed gratification and on doing things that are hard in the moment but give us really good results. So it's, one, not doing a pleasurable thing now, or two, doing something that even can be painful now or hurts now, but because we know it has benefits down the line, because our tendency is so much to go away from that, is to do the thing that feels good in the moment. That is just a biological basic necessity or basic truth. And so we're always looking for ways to feel okay, because that obviously feels better. And because of that, when we get information that's distressing, that obviously doesn't feel good. We try to get rid of that bad feeling. And so we can do a few things to try to get there, but we almost always will put some effort to get to some place that leaves us feeling in a better place. So you hear about some tragedy in the world, and it shouldn't feel good. When you hear about human suffering, if you are a decent human being, and most human beings will feel bad if they hear about it, especially if we see the images, that's even more triggering of emotions that will feel very real and very intense. And so we feel bad when we hear about human suffering. And this can even bring up our sense of compassion, which is that in the face of suffering, we want to do something for that person who is suffering. So I hear of someone, or I see someone in some kind of distress, and it makes me want to act. And we all could feel this, right? You see someone in some kind of pain, and it makes you want to go help them in some way. This is a very basic reaction, a very good one. And sometimes we say the basis of compassion itself. What can be tough is sometimes we can't help the person, or even harder is when the situation involves lots of people suffering and there's no way for us to help, and especially if they're far away, that even more we can feel the sense of powerlessness, or we can't do anything about it. So it puts us in this challenging spot where we feel bad, but our normal way of helping with that feeling bad, which is to help the person, is not possible, either because they're too far away, or because it's way too many people, or it's something that we can't do something about. And so it puts us in this tough spot of like, how do I deal with this? Either I have to just keep feeling bad about it, or have this negative feeling because this doesn't feel good, or I could try other things. And that's what we often try to do. What are those other things? Well, one of the things is to even first maybe deny it. Maybe it's not even real. Maybe it's not happening. And related to that, maybe I can just turn away and maybe forget it. And that's what most of us are doing most of the time. There's a lot of suffering, unfortunately, that's happening around the world. And most of us, most of the time, are not paying attention to most of it. We're kind of just closing our eyes to it, not paying attention. We maybe hear something, but we don't hear more. We read about it once, but then try to avoid it and just pretend like it doesn't exist because facing it doesn't feel good. And if we can't get rid of the problem or the problem doesn't seem to be going away, it might be easier just to turn away. And that's what we're doing. We have to admit it. A lot of us Iranians right now, we're very upset, understandably, about how little attention has been paid to Iran and that more attention should be paid to the people of Iran who are suffering under this brutal regime and literally getting killed in the streets for protesting. But we have to also, I think, be real that most of us, I can just speak for myself, haven't always paid attention or don't know about all the suffering that is happening in other parts of the world where injustices are happening. So I think it can be important to keep that in mind, that we're always not paying attention to a lot of people who are suffering, a lot of groups who are suffering in the world. Doesn't mean don't keep amplifying the voices of the people of Iran. I say that so we can be aware of and mindful of, okay, when we get mad about this, it's an understandable anger, but also we've been there too. We've been the one not paying attention to someone suffering, if we're going to be real with ourselves. So just something to keep in mind is that we always haven't seen what has been going on around the world. But so people will choose to just look away or ignore it because that is easier than feeling bad, or at least it leaves them feeling better than to keep looking at it. Another thing that we might do is to say maybe it's not that bad. That's another. So I'm feeling bad because it seems like these people are really suffering, but maybe it isn't that bad. The suffering isn't that bad, or it's less people, or it doesn't look like they're getting bad hurt by it, or, even, oh, they died. Well, I guess maybe if they're dead, that's easier. We might just justify weird ways that we can justify things that we would never normally do. But say maybe there's somewhere where it's not that bad. And another level deeper than that is maybe the victims are to blame or they're not victims. So maybe these people, they deserve it, or they've done something wrong, or the people that are getting punished are the ones that actually did something wrong, and there's other people that didn't. So this is why blaming the victim, we hear that term a lot, because it's a way of comforting ourselves that the bad thing is not happening to an innocent person. It's someone who deserved it in some way. Either they're bad themselves or they did something stupid. That's we also feel like, oh, someone was jogging at night and they got attacked. And we might think, well, maybe you shouldn't be jogging at night or something, rather than thinking, wow, that's horrible that someone got attacked at night. And that one, it's not just that we don't want to think of that person's pain. We have this thing called the need for a just world, where it's a lot more comforting to think that bad things only happen to bad people or people that make stupid decisions. If I make smart decisions, I can avoid being the victim of these kinds of things. That's a much more comforting position than, oh, damn, sometimes people are at the wrong place at the wrong time. Someone's doing something that I've done myself hundreds of times, and they got hurt somehow because of it or by it, in that same situation. That's probably the reality, but it's a lot easier to think, oh, like, who does that? I would never go do this thing. So maybe it's their fault that it happened. So we blame the victim in a lot of different ways because it is a comforting position to have, which sounds strange. You're almost taking the position or the benefiting the oppressor or the one who perpetrated some kind of crime, but it's a much more comfortable place to think that the person was an innocent victim. They somehow either asked for it, made a stupid decision, or they were bad themselves. So that's kind of what happened. So we're very good at discounting people's suffering. And I've seen this a lot, paying attention to how people talk about things, that if you talk about something sad, oh, there's, child poverty, even in the United States, that children are going through certain things, and you'll be in a group and people are having a conversation, and all of a sudden, someone will share a perspective that somehow justifies it or makes it okay. Well, you know what? not every kid can be rich. We have to just accept that. Or, they're not that poor. No kid, no child in America is going hungry. That's just not even a real thing. That's a myth, though. So there's no food insecurity, or that's just something made up. So they're discounting that it's even real. Or, they make bad decisions, and that's why they're in that situation. So I don't feel bad for them because they made the bad decisions to get there. So we're blaming the victims. And what I always say to that is, let's just even say the parents made bad decisions. I don't agree with that because poverty is a very complicated thing and much more systematic than just individuals that only are the ones making bad decisions. But even if you think that to be true, how can you justify the children being in poverty? They made bad decisions. They deserve to be in poverty? Absolutely not. I think it's a very hard position to defend in any kind of a way. But people will come up with things, even if it's not sometimes going through tough times makes you stronger. You see a lot of these stories of someone who grew up poor and look what it made them. And those things can be true. Yes, some people face extreme challenges and it might have made them stronger and they became resilient, but that definitely doesn't justify hurting someone. And if that's the case, okay, then give me all of your money, give me all of your possessions. Lucky you that we're giving you this hard time because you're saying hard times are good. So yeah, just give us everything and let's just injure you too and do all these things because this is all helping you grow. You're so lucky. It's really to me a almost funny situation or funny position to have, but you hear people make these kinds of what to me are really weak and crazy arguments to defend suffering of people that don't deserve to suffer. So again, if you're saying suffering is okay, then we're having a totally different conversation. If you're saying suffering is not a bad thing, for especially kids to be suffering, I just can't even understand what argument we're having. So people are very good at finding ways to justify what's going on. And often if someone gives a perspective that makes the situation seem okay, any of these ways I'm saying, the group might be like, oh yeah, okay, because it's comforting and it feels good. Okay, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe this isn't so bad. Or maybe those people deserve to suffer. Or maybe the suffering is good for them. Or whatever is that justification. And if there's someone who's like, you know what, no, this is wrong. This is bad. They're almost looked at as an annoying person, we're all feeling okay, or we all got to the place where we all feel okay, and here you are giving us, your annoying opinion that maybe it's not okay. Maybe we shouldn't just accept things as they are, or maybe these justifications we're giving aren't good reasons for what's happening in the world. And that person is looked at as the more, unstable one or unhealthy one, because on the surface, another one of those things that fools us, if someone looks okay and someone else looks distressed, the person that looks okay seems to be the healthier one and the stronger one. And the other one seems to be either more sick or weak or something is wrong with them. But in this case, this is kind of like if there's a room filled with smoke and someone is breathing comfortably in it and someone else is coughing, the person who's coughing is actually the healthy one. Because smoke should feel bad to your body, should be something your body is rejecting. But if you're someone, for example, who smokes a pack of cigarettes a day and you're around cigarette smoke, you might not cough around that. It might even actually feel good to you. So, you might even look at these two people and one of them is smiling. He's like, oh, this smells nice, or this is comforting, or it's giving me some nicotine, which feels good to me. And the other person's coughing and their eyes might be watering and they just look totally unhappy. And so just if we look at their reactions without knowing what the situation is, we think of that person who's has that smile on his face healthier than the other person who is coughing. But when we're looking at an unhealthy environment, the healthy reaction is to have a negative feeling about it. And when we're looking at injustices in the world, the healthy reaction is to feel upset by it, not to be calm and, oh, actually, I don't feel bad about it at all. It sounds like a strong position, and many people will talk about that person as if they're having a strong position, but it's actually a very, very weak one. It's actually that I can't tolerate their pain, so I'm doing this, or I've become so used to their pain, kind of like in the smoke analogy, that it doesn't bother me anymore to see people suffering, to even see children suffering. That's not at all a position of strength. And so it is healthy to have painful reactions to injustices in the world. When you see something unjust, it is a healthy response to have that. If you're either addicted to negative things, or you made yourself desensitized to negative things, that you won't feel anything or you'll feel okay with it. But you being okay doesn't mean you're okay. It's a sign of a very unhealthy heart, an unhealthy mind that can look at an injustice and feel okay about it. So the reality is that if we're going to be connected to this world, we have to be ready to feel bad about it a lot of the times. There's a lot of injustices going on. And if we're going to be genuinely engaged with this world, we have to allow ourselves to feel bad, or else we have to feel either disconnected or justify things in some kind of a crazy way. It's a tough position, because what I'm saying is there isn't some, I wish I could give you some peaceful resolution. That's what people are looking for. If you're looking at the suffering of the world, don't worry. It's all okay. Or it's a plan, or it's this. I think those are oversimplifications. I think those are kind of like opium of the masses. I know they talk about religion in that way, or Nietzsche did, but that's kind of, or was it Marx? I think it was Marx. Either way, there are other ways of opium that goes to the masses, and this is one of them. It's ways of just comforting whatever you're seeing in the world and making yourself feel okay about it or by it, and thinking that's a good thing. So for me, the more real approach is that we have to allow ourselves to feel bad about these things and accept that we're going to feel bad about these things. And I think for all of us Iranians, when we see the people of Iran suffering, we can't help but feel horrible about it and so sad about it and worry about them and hope for the swiftest outcome. We just hope that people around the world will give that same attention and care and compassion to those people in Iran. Let's go to our last commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So today I've been talking about some topics not specifically related to Iran in those middle segments. They're all connected to what's going on there because of the ways that we're getting information, what we're listening to, what we think about things, our opinions on things, and also what we share with other people, and also how we feel about things, which are all related to what's happening there. And even as I talk about these things, they come with a certain luxury or privilege. And that word privilege gets used a lot and has become this very triggering word for a lot of people. Trigger is also a word that has emotional loaded, has a lot of emotionally loaded for a lot of people as well. But what I mean by that is that it can be, hard to make, it's tough to look through the information, or it's hard to do these things, or these challenges that we might have when we consider what the people in Iran are going through and what unspeakable horrors they've had to witness, what is in front of them and what they're facing. It can be tough to even consider our own challenges as challenges, and that's what I mean by privilege. We're lucky to have these kinds of problems, even if they are difficult at times. And so I hope that people in Iran know, I don't know, I know because of the internet that they probably can't even hear me or hear us here much. I hope they can, to hear our love and support, and that we are with them, which only I know means so much, because they're the ones that have to do all the hard work and sacrifices that they're doing there, and literally many of them have given their lives, and families have lost loved ones. So just want them to know that we around the world will have our conversations, talk about things, talk about challenges, but we know that it's nothing compared to what they're going through. And that's something that we always have in mind, because even something that I've noticed is that for many people outside of Iran, it could feel like things are on pause right now. People are telling me that they're just on their phones all day long, looking at news, looking for news. You're obviously hoping for good news, but wanting to see what's going on, wanting to know what to share, wanting to know how can they get involved. And I think that's always very important, that we can share and repost and make videos and all that, which is very good. But then also there's times where we can do things like contacting your local representatives and politicians to make sure they're aware of what's going on and that they feel the pressure to get involved in whatever ways that they can, or to make sure that the eyes are on Iran in that way. So I recognize that when I talk about these topics to someone who is in Iran, it could seem like how are even things that people are worried about? You don't know what we're going through. And so I think that reality is always going to be there. And at the same time, all of us have to make sure we take care of ourselves and take care of our loved ones. Even myself as now a father, and that's something that's been interesting how your perspective can change. I always cared about what was going on, but you can feel a different feeling when you have your own child and you see a mother or father learning about their parents, their child's death, whatever age. Um, Obviously, I was greatly affected by images like that before, but it has a different type of visceral, deeper emotional reaction from me than before. And it's just hard to even comprehend what people have had to go through. Uh, but I do say the saying that we have to make sure we take care of ourselves too, those of us who are outside of Iran. Of course, those inside of Iran in however way that they can. But speaking to those of us outside of Iran or the people who are outside, because I do see us at times losing, not taking care of ourselves in those ways. Again, a place of privilege, but one that's still real. I mentioned this, I think it was last week, that yes, when we suffer, it sometimes is a sign of how much we're affected by things, but suffering more or making the suffering show more or feeling it more doesn't necessarily help the other person. So, yes, we are heartbroken about what is going on in Iran. We care. At the same time, if we don't take care of ourselves, that doesn't help them. So we have to make sure to take care of ourselves, and especially parents, I'm thinking of, who have a responsibility to their children to still show up and to still be there for them because they need you. So I hope you'll stay connected, stay informed, post and do all the things that you can, whatever is in your power and responsibility that can help the people of Iran. And at the same time, making sure you take care of yourself enough to be there for your kids, which I know I've talked to some parents, it can be tough. They're feeling so emotionally drained or, maybe even they're crying and they don't want their kids to see. And actually, let me comment on that since I'm, as if someone else brought it up, I'm saying it myself, but, I think it's okay for your kids to see you cry. And I mean, I know maybe that sounds simple, but how you're doing it, how much there could be, I'm not saying it's always going to be okay. So if you're crying all day long, for days in a row, that could be tough for a child, especially depending on the age. But I don't think it's if we're telling our kids not to hide their feelings, and of course, they have the space to come to us no matter what. We don't have that same space. So that it should be said. I'm not saying that you should cry to your kids as much as they can cry to you because you are their parent and they're not supposed to be your parent and taking care of you. But overall, to show that you have emotions and they come out can be okay. Gauge your kids' reactions, see how they're doing with it, but don't feel like you have to hide all of your feelings from them. If you're saddened by something, if you're saddened by what's going on in Iran and you feel that, you could feel emotion, you could talk to them about it. I do think you have to be aware of how out of control you get with your emotions. Crying to me is not out of control, but you can get hysterical to the point where then your kids really might freak out about how you're doing. But don't feel like you can't show them emotion and you can talk to them. I'm sad because, again, depending on their age, if they're too young, you have to be aware of how you talk about things. But especially if they're slightly older or teenagers, they can handle that and you can have a conversation that I'm sad about what's going on there. I'm sad about how the people are being treated, and I'm hopeful for something better, and even have conversations where they can share their ideas about it. I think something that's always very hopeful for me is we look at the next generation who we've already started to mess them up a little bit, but they also have often more pure ways of looking at things. And by pure, I don't mean naive, but that they can see things with fresher eyes because they have fresher eyes. And why do things have to be this way, or why should they be this way? And so you can engage with your older kids about what do they think and how do they think things should be, or what would they do differently or see should be different. But yes, we have to make sure we take care of ourselves overall for our kids and then to be there for our kids. So you can't not take care of yourself, but take care of your kids. If you're not okay, you can't be okay for them. And I felt that with my son, who's a baby. And so, he can't, obviously there's no conversations. I mean, we do talk to each other, but I don't think, it's a lot of words that are actually being exchanged that we both understand of each other. But of course, he's going to feel me if I'm tense or if I'm stressed or if I'm down. He, of course, will feel that, even if he, at his age, it's not conscious or he's not talking about it in a certain way. So he'll feel where I'm at. and I have to be aware of that. That if I do have a responsibility to him. So this doesn't mean it's also another black and white. It doesn't mean you can never be affected by it. You should have zero, impact in how you are with them. That's not realistic. But we still have to be aware of how we show up for them and how we take care of them. And so being on our phones all day, I've heard it from many people, and right now being a newer development, and we don't know how long things will last or how they will go, but it feels newer. So I understand people are looking for all the information that they can get and to stay up to speed. I do think there's always a balance that we have to find, and even that could sound cold to some people, like how dare you look away when the people of Iran are suffering. And I'm not saying look away at all. Definitely keep your attention and try to keep the world's attention on it. But it doesn't mean literally every minute of your attention is there. We still have to make sure we take care of ourselves, even staying to certain routines, especially staying physically active when we're feeling even more stressed. And if you're crying, you have buildup of different types of, stress hormones and things in your body that we need to get rid of. We need to release. And so when we're on our phones, we're just feeling stressed and emotional and might cry, and we're just sitting there, and just all this stuff is just staying in our body. So if you can move and be physically active, please do that. Make sure you take care of yourself in that way. And very importantly, let's take care of each other. Again, I don't want to, so I say these things when I think of what is happening with the people in Iran, but if you're outside of Iran and don't have to face those things directly, you can make sure you take care of each other. If you can take care of someone in Iran, please do so. I know communication has been shut down, making that so challenging. I hope that changes soon. And in some ways we can. Sending our messages, I think, has some impact, or hopefully will, as minimal as that might be. But if you can make a direct impact, obviously do that, but with one another. And I know people are. They're checking in. They're, seeing how everyone's doing, because people were just all just gutted by what is going on in Iran right now. So support one another in whatever ways you can. Check in with people. Ask for help that you need. Ask for support that you might need. And also, when I say support one another, I do want to make one more plea about supporting one another and being united in what is happening for us outside of Iran, and trying to support the people of Iran. Even if we can keep that in mind, that we're going to have differences, disagreements, different ideas about things. But if we think of the people in Iran who are suffering, I think we'll realize that putting those things aside to help them the best way that we can is more important than anything else. So, yes, you want things to be done the right way and whatever we think is the right way, and those things can very much matter. But again, doesn't matter more than these kids that are being killed in the street, these people that are being killed by this government. And the more disunited we are, the longer it will take for things to happen. The more we're disunited, the more likely it is for misinformation to be spread, that it seems like we don't know what's going on because even the people who seem to be on one side don't agree or are not on the same side. And that's really unfortunate. So the more disunited we are, the more space that gets, leaves these cracks for these bad things to come through and to come out. And so we're only hurting each other, but more importantly, hurting the people of Iran when we attack one another and when we, think that we know the only right way. And unfortunately, I'm seeing still a lot of that. I feel like it's in some ways less than last time. But when I say last time, I mean the Massa Amini protests. But it's still very much out there. What I see more of, as I was saying, on social media, people who are spreading these narratives that are, false or misleading. But within the Iranian community, I've seen more. Maybe that's just what I'm seeing. I don't know if it's the case, but I will always push for more of that unity, and more of that humility, that none of us knows the exact right thing that's supposed to happen next. And none of us knows exactly how things are going to end up if we go this way or that way. What I think is, we do know is that this regime is bad for the whole world, but bad for the people of Iran. That part seems very clear, that when you have a government that's, look what they've done to the country as far as the economy, but in so many other ways, how they treat women, and now what they've done before, but now doing it more aggressively, slaughtering their own people in the streets, it's obvious that this government is not good for the people. So does anyone know exactly what's going to happen next? No. But we can't only take a step when we know what's going to happen exactly, because then we would never be able to take a step. There's no way to know exactly what will happen next. And I hope we can have that intellectual humility that even if you think you know, you might be wrong. And more importantly than you being specifically right or wrong is making sure you work together with the people that have a common goal, if that common goal is getting rid of this regime, because the only way we'll make a big change happen is if we all work together. I mean, look at these people in Iran. They're going into the streets and risking their lives. I'm sure not all of them think exactly the same about what's going to happen next, but they're joining forces together. They're putting themselves out there with unity, and they're making a big impact. So those of us on the outside, we have to make our impact unified as well. And lastly, on that note about making our impact, I hope you will join whatever protests you can to make your voices heard and make sure they hear our voices and the world is hearing the voices of the Iranians around the world that are upset and angry and care about their brothers and sisters in Iran. That brings us to the end of today's show. A big thank you to Farid in the studio. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee, Zan Zendegi Azadi.